All right, so again, welcome to our class today. We're dealing with module 8 of Ethical Hacker course as compiled by Cisco. We're looking at performing post-exploitation techniques. Without much ado, I'm going to dive straight into it, and then we'll see what we have to achieve. I'll do some introduction, then I'll show a video. Then we would move straight to the slides and see how far we can go tonight, right? So, um, I'm going to attempt to do some sort of definitions, right? And usually, since we're in a class setting or class environment, I am a big fan of not taking for granted certain definitions because it puts the entire learning curve in a perspective, right? So it's clearly spelled out here, the title of our topic, performing post-exploitation techniques. My focus will be the exploitation, post, and the techniques, and I'll attempt to give a definition to it. Right. So first of all, I would attempt to explain from a cybersecurity perspective, right? And also cybersecurity, or yeah, from the cybersecurity perspective, I attempt to explain what we perhaps would call exploitation. Because if we look at the English dictionary, it may communicate something completely different, but let's attempt to look at it from cybersecurity. So I would say, like, say, in context, within the context of cyber security, right, focusing specifically on cyber attacks, exploitation could be what we refer to as a process, right? This process takes advantage, or let's say leverages, the weaknesses that exist in a system, in an application, or a network. So all of these guys, remember, I think we've established already that most of this, whether it's a system, an application, or a network, they were never designed to be weak. They were designed as the best thing ever when they were released. However, things evolve, and because of the evolution of things, what was great yesterday could now be found wanting today. So typically, there will be one or two things within the structure of either the system or the application or the network that would now become, which was strong, but now becomes a weakness that can be leveraged or taken advantage of. So let me use the word of taking advantage because it sort of scores the point better than just leveraging. Leveraging is just an English word that can be explained in a lot of terms. So let's say taking advantage, right? So if somebody were to take advantage of weaknesses or vulnerabilities that are existing within what you're enjoying, system, application, or network, what would be his goal? The goal here simply would be to gain, well, it's not just one, right? To maybe let's look at it this way. I think some series of things that could happen there. Number one, um, you want to gain access. However, this access is unauthorized, right? You want to perhaps also, after taking advantage of a weakness of either the system, application, or network, you may also want to, tweak privileges and escalate it. We talked about some part of it in our previous class where certain levels of privileges are escalated, whether vertically or horizontally, right? What you're doing here is to say somebody who doesn't have a privilege is given a privilege because you want to carry out some tasks that are not very pleasant. Okay, so you want to escalate privileges, or ultimately, you want to perform or carry out, or let's say execute malicious actions, right? So typically, the attacker who is doing this would not be doing it just by looking at the network. He would involve or invoke the use of certain tricks, or let's call them techniques. Now, these tricks could maybe would be by using a tool, which is like a software already prepared for that particular action that takes advantage of a weakness that exists in a system, an application, or a network, right? It could be using tools or perhaps some tricks or techniques. And these techniques takes advantage of the bugs that exist in all of these things, right? Could be bugs in the software, in the terms of application. Could also be weaknesses that are existing within the configurations that were done, right? or perhaps it takes advantage of some security weaknesses or security errors or flaws. Okay. And here, there are two ways the attacker wants to do it in exploitation. He perhaps wants to do it and move, or do it and gain, like what we can call, let's say, a foothold, so that in the days to come, he knows where to enter from. We're going to watch a clip very shortly, right, to explain that. So, as far as definition go, I would say that is what exploitation is. So, let's say in a nutshell, it would be taking advantage of weaknesses in a system, application, or a network in order to gain authorized access, escalate privileges, or perhaps execute malicious actions. And most often than not, it involves the use of tools or techniques. And here is with the hope of taking advantage of exploiting weaknesses in weaknesses in the software, bugs that exist in the software, configuration weaknesses, or perhaps security flaws. Okay. Now let's look at, so we've attempted to explain exploitation. So let's, from English, put in two words together, say post-exploitation. Simply focuses on the stage after the attack has happened. This after the exploitation has occurred, right? So typically here, what happens in this case is that it focuses mainly on maintaining access. That's number one. Stay there, maintain access. Number two, you want to perhaps sit there while maintaining access, gather information, which is in this case, we talked about it earlier, reconnaissance, right? Perhaps at some point, you observed after gathering this information, you want to escalate certain privileges and be able to expand your control. Okay. Now, why does this have to happen to we penetration testers? Typically, you should understand that once you are involved, once somebody engages your service, it's likely to be able to tell them how porous their network is. So you engage in testing the network by penetrating the network to find how far. So you are going to take a posture of someone attacking the network to find out how far the attacker would go, should it be the attacker that is actually launching a successful attempt at it. Okay, so the post exploitation is a very critical stage for every threat actor, right? Why? Because he is going to sit down there and do lots of things. Typically, having gained access, he's exploited. Now, after exploitation has been done, he sits there largely, like I said earlier, to number one, right? Gather information. Number two, escalate privileges. And perhaps expanding control. Whatever control they've had, want to expand it. Okay. So techniques in this case now would be the tools. So to basically, and most of these techniques from the perspective of a penetration tester are against the backdrop of frameworks. I think I told us something earlier about framework standards and best practices. So the document is in the group. Please refer to it. I did that on purpose because I knew we were going to come to this stage and even further. Because most of what you do needs to be as approved, right? Either you are following a particular guideline, which is the framework, or it's in accordance with setting rules, which are standards, or maybe an advice, which will be considered best practice. Okay, and best practices in Nigeria may not be best practices in Angola. Okay, because simply put, the buildup of the people and the level of appreciation of those category of people of the people in these different regions are not the same. Okay, so with regards to the techniques that are used, right, quite a number of them, I would say that more or less it maybe attempts to highlight methods used to be able to gain initial access, achieve specific foothold, and stay there. So usually you're looking at things like reconnaissance, which is intelligence gathering, right? You're looking at privilege escalation, which is, of course, attempting to give somebody certain rights which the person perhaps doesn't have or is not supposed to have. Then there's also what we call persistence, staying there. We're going to watch a clip shortly. So then there will be data exfiltration because typically you attack to carry that data to go somewhere. And we've said this also before now. Going forward in the field of IT, the next thing that is more or less a parallel of crude would be data because, hey, data is practically everything. On the grounds of data, you can do a lot of projections. On the ground of data, you can do a lot of targeting, sales, and the rest of them. Okay. So typically the techniques ensure that the threat actor optimizes. I would have loved to use the word maximize, but I'll prefer optimize. So let me paint a picture. There's something that I do with words that help me. I like to put side by side the word maximize and optimize. Maximize is, let's look at an orange juice. Maximize would be like, the orange has been peeled and then you're sucking at the juice. Right? The entire juice inside finish. You're done with the juice. You can throw away the orange, what's it called now? After the orange, the juice is done, you're done. You throw away the other part. That is maximizing. Whereas optimizing, I don't know if some of you guys have optimized orange here. You suck the orange finish, then you tear open the inside and chew the pulp. So that's like when you are done with optimization, nothing is left to be wasted, right? So I would say that the techniques or the techniques for post-exploitation are largely to ensure that the threat actor optimizes the impact of their intrusion. Now that they've been able to gain that level of access, legally or not legally, matter of fact, most times illegally, right? What they want to do is to optimize their impact, get the best out of whatever is there, right? While be able to escape or evade being detected. So that's like the introduction to the topic. I haven't said that, now let me quickly jump into the video so we can watch it. Then from that point, we'll look at the various things to consider, certain considerations when performing post-exploitation for any environment. Look at objective clarification, operational security, and the rest of them. So let me quickly show you the video now. Hold on, please. So the video is playing now. So, okay, hold on, sorry. I think I showed the wrong thing. Hold on, please. I thought that okay, yeah. Great, so it's playing now.
The race is on to get a fully self-driving car to market.
Autonomous car company Opticon promises a
cars that drive themselves. Opticon's new cars.
Joining conference now.
Destroyed data and deleted the backups. We can recover most of it, but some of the research may be gone for good. According to the forensics, they may have had access to the blueprints.
The FBI arrested a San Francisco man in connection with last month's Opticon.
Hey, Brian, can I get you anything? Coffee or soda or something before we start?
No.
So, walk me through it, step by step.
Well, I took over the website to a bowling alley.
Brian, this is not a joke.
Okay, look. They have this research facility down the peninsula, and they're working on optical tracking cameras for driverless cars. So, just searching through social media, I get the names of a whole bunch of engineers who are working there. And as I'm looking them up, I come across this bowling league where a bunch of tech companies play every Wednesday. And this is an old school bowling alley with this really ancient website. And it has all the league info, company names, player names.
Okay, so you hacked into a bowling alley website.
Yeah.
All right, explain how that works.
It's called an iframe injection attack. It's this old exploit that hits anyone that visits the website. So a week later, this guy from Opticon suddenly has my malware on his laptop. I couldn't believe it worked. It was like a joke.
What does that get you?
Well, the next day he goes to work and he opens his laptop and he connects to the network. And that's it. I'm in.
Yeah, but that still doesn't get you inside. I mean, they discovered it. They wiped the laptop, scanned the network.
They didn't scan the whole network. The thermostat's part of the network. It's inside the firewall. It's connected to Opticon's entire network. You can get the whole standard configuration and password online in 30 seconds. I got it off the manufacturer's website. So they scanned most of the network. They didn't scan the thermostat.
Then what?
Then I just went exploring. It was a totally flat network, no subnets or anything. I could see everything, HR files, legal documents, R&D. When I found the blueprints, I realized I could make some money off these files.
What happened after you sent the files?
Oh, then I burned everything down. I wiped everything I could find, encrypted drives and deleted backups.
Is the network down? I can't change something with the database.
The servers look corrupt. We're going to have to do a full restore from the backup.
No, the backups are encrypted.
This is deliberate.
This is a major breach.
Malware.
We gotta call the FBI.
I was just
And somebody paid you how much exactly?
75 bitcoins.
Nice. Not enough to retire on, but still. All right, Brian Page. Are you sure you don't know who paid you?
European automaker Q-Car has beaten Opticon to market with their QX sedan, the world's first self-driving car. Opticon shares tumbled 11% on the news.
All right. So the video is about 3 minutes, 37 seconds, and is loaded with practically everything we've been talking about from module 1 to this point. So on overview, then we'll dive straight into our curriculum. The guy was arrested, and it was because he was caught, or certain things happened, it was traced back to him. Matter of fact, kudos, they're simply telling you that the particular organization has a very good security outfit. Okay. Sorry, let me see. Oh, please confirm you can see my screen. Thumbs up will do. Okay. Okay, great. All right, so let me go ahead and share it again. I think I have some. Okay, great. I just stopped sharing it. So let me share it again, just so that we can have. Okay. Okay, great. So the video just captured. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Afiniki. So so Goswell, are you raising a hand to ask a question or indicating that you can see it? Because this one that you don't know.
Yeah, I was just indicating that I can see.
Okay, nice. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. So the video just captures some guy who was arrested, and upon further querying, when they were asking the guy a question, he detailed practically everything he did leading to, compromising it. Apparently, he was approached, or wasn't, right, by some organization. The movie started by saying there was an initiative that the American company would want to say. Let me say this. The video is actually a script that was acted to communicate things that happen in cybersecurity. So it's not like a real thing that occurred. You just captured it, and the focus was to be able to help communicate to we in this particular sector how these things would occur. Now, so that you see some knowledge of web, right? You see some knowledge of scripting, you see some knowledge of network, you see some knowledge of security, all combined in all of this, which is where this course is going. So he was arrested, and upon query, he said that he heard that he wanted that he noticed that there was a particular project going on, which was maybe self-driving car research and development was going on as regard that project, and he went ahead to use a very popular social media platform to gather information about all of these guys, and he found out that there were a lot of doctors who were working on this research. Upon doing that, he observed that, hey, they all meet at a social point. It's a bowling alley. And the bowling alley had a website. And in his thinking, they could maybe sometimes attempt, plugging either the wireless network of that place or browsing through that particular website and all. And so he dropped a particular malware on that website, and one guy picked it. The guy picked it. Apparently, he was the staff of that organization that was doing research on the self-driving car. Mind you, this was an American concept, right? He went into the office, and the moment he powered up his system, he said he got a notification that some guy picked his stuff. And of course, by using the command and control approach, he was able to sit where he was, initiated the command, and whatever script he actually embedded or injected in the website swung into action, and the entire systems were infected. So kudos to the organization, because from what you see in the script, they had a team. The team swung into action. Perhaps they had some form of alert telling them, hey, something's going wrong. Some stuff has come into our network, and it wasn't here originally. In short, they didn't capture the other side. If I were the script writer, I would actually also do another script to capture the organization and their approach. Maybe I'll do season 1, season 2 episodes like that, just for the purpose of communicating this and making sure the picture is well-rounded. But to their credit, they were able to arrest that particular thing. And then the interviewer or the interrogator tells him, oh, yeah, but hey, you didn't get in too far. They stopped it. And he points it out to them. So you got it wrong. They actually scanned laptops and desktops and computers, but they forgot other components that were part of the network. Components that are beginning to become a thing today. We call them Internet of Things, where you have television, bulbs, doors. In his case, it was a thermostat, which is becoming a main thing for people who are building integrated systems, integrated houses. So one control point that perhaps controls the air conditioning, the power, and the rest of them, right? Ventilation as well. So he said it was part of the network, and he observed that yeah, they scanned everything, but he still had one device that was feeding him back, which was the thermostat, and that gave him the access. So he went back in there, observed the thermostat, got the details of the thermostat, and got the configuration file of that thermostat online in 30 seconds. And unfortunately, for this company of that size, they were crazy about their computers and their desktop and servers that had it all intact, but they didn't pay attention to something as tiny as a thermostat, which was part of their network. So he was able to gain access there. And when he gained access, what he did this time around was to ensure that he covered his tracks, one. Number two, he was able to now at this point inflict injury. In this case, notice there was a different tool he used to enter. He used another tool to stay, then used another tool to cause the havoc. This time around, he encrypted their files, what you may call ransomware. And he was asking them to pay. If you observe, all their files were getting encrypted and they all got panicked. In the video, you notice somewhere somebody said, let's call the FBI. So, of course, FBI swung into action. It's simply just indicating that, hey, no matter how you do, the hand of the law can reach you. That's the moral they're communicating there. But the end of the video, right, captured another company in another part of the world, this time around Europe. And the highlight was the first company in Europe to release self-driving cars. So now you can imagine the economic aspect of this. You can imagine the technology aspect of it. You can imagine the political might. So states or nations are beginning, or let's say nation states are beginning to use this thing to wound each other, right? There are lots of nations doing it right now. So people who actually publicize their research and all of this stuff are at risk of it being stolen. Certain details of it can actually be carried away and, done with. But it focuses on exploitation and certain techniques that he used. That's what the video focused on. So it's on YouTube. It's actually, the title of the video is actually Anatomy of an Attack, right? I think there are 7 steps or so. Can't remember that off my head now. Anatomy of an attack. But there are techniques, right, that are, or let's say points of consideration. And I'll list them down. We'll go straight to the configuration, to the curriculum. Number 1 is to determine the end goal. This time around, this is where you are very clear about your objective. Determine the end goal. Number 2, you ensure activities that you carry out minimize your detection and you avoid triggering defenses. This time around, that's more or less operational security, right? Number 3 is persistence. This is how you plan to maintain access regardless of what happens. Even after the system has been, certain features has actually kicked in, and sometimes it may reboot, or perhaps certain defensive actions can swing into play. What you want to do is to be persistent about it, about the attack. Number 4, you ensure that you understand the legal and ethical boundaries. Particularly, this is for we, the good guys. Okay, understand the ethical aspect of it. This is more or less data for compliance, data protection compliance. Number 5, system impact. Understand that, okay, somebody is asking a question. Yes, don't worry, I'm getting there. Like, okay, if you remember, I normally do a review so that one would delve into the curriculum, even when we don't finish, I've done a good capture. So I'll do that now. FL sound. Yeah. So then lastly, you're welcome. Evidence collection. This is where you document your activity. So as a pen tester, your job is to be able to, please note, as a pen tester, somebody invites you and says, guy, babe, check this network. I'm not so certain, right? So what you are doing is to ensure that you stick to all of this. And this is with respect to a pen tester's approach, right? Assuming the posture of a threat actor who's attempting to puncture a hole in the network, right? So there are a lot of techniques. We talked about some of them yesterday. One is privilege escalation, credential dumping, persistence mechanism, movement, lateral movement, data exfiltration, reconnaissance, command and control. Then, very importantly, lastly, cleaning up, which is what the guy was saying, that he was scared. So he cleaned up. And he was paid in Bitcoins, interestingly, to the point where the resources that they expend are no more like the physical cash that we use. Is largely some crypto stuff. So let's dive into what we're dealing with today and see what we can achieve. These are the topic titles we're looking at. Explain how to perform post-exploitation activities. That's the objective of this module. And then number one, create a foothold and maintain persistence after compromising the system. Please remember that you are dealing with this as you're not the attacker, but you're assuming the posture of the attacker so that you can advise your employer on the post. Now, whether they need it or don't need it, it's important that they actually are informed about what happens. Then number two, understanding how to perform lateral movement, detection, avoidance, and enumeration. Typically, listing, identify how you navigate the network. Also, to avoid being caught, or being detected, whatever stuff they have could be tools or could be techniques, right? Let me also say this, like I've said before, like I always say, most of what happens here are tools. I'm longing for the day that we'll develop our own. As long as we are consuming stuff, we're not ready. But until we get there, let's use tools, right? Until we can rear our chicken, let's buy chicken. All right, creating a foothold and maintaining persistence after compromising the system. Now, after the exploitation phase of any attack, which is usually where the attack itself occurs, you need to maintain some level of posture, right? Now that the system has been compromised, right? You want to ensure that you have a foothold, right? I'm going to go through all of these steps shortly. A foothold to perform additional tasks, such as you want to perhaps install certain services, or you want to modify certain services, or you to connect back to the compromised system. So this is typically how, and this is thinking in your head that the people you are attempting to attack or penetrate, right, are perhaps not just dull people. They have systems in place, they have tools in place, they have mechanisms in place that can detect all of these maneuvers. So, but the idea is to think beyond it and assume a posture where you cannot be detected, because gaining access or compromising the first point of security is not all there is. There are quite a number of things to do. So you can maintain the persistence of a compromised system in several ways. Number one, creating a bind or reverse shell. We're going to explain some of them very shortly. Two, creating and manipulating scheduled jobs and tasks. Things like update. Things like update or backup. Creating custom daemons and processes. So daemons are like tiny messengers that are attached to every service, which carry out the actual work for the service. And each time they initiate a particular service, a process is initiated. Creating new users, then creating additional backdoors so that once they close one door, you can always come back. Like in the case of the video that we watched, it's not like the guy created the backdoor, but he found the backdoor. And his backdoor in this case was the thermostat after they've actually closed all the doors that he came in through. Remember, he came in through a laptop. He came in from a website into a laptop, and the laptop introduced him to the network of the environment. And once that particular script that he injected into the site where the guy picked it from was activated, typically what happens is that the entire network was in sham. But then they had systems that blocked all of those, but they forgot his backdoor, which is what they created for him. In this case, a thermostat, right? So when you maintain persistence in a compromised system, you can take several actions such as uploading additional tools. Okay, so we're looking at reverse shell now. Is that? Yeah, okay, no, great. Oh, great. I'm getting there shortly. Okay, so when you maintain persistence in a compromised system, you can take several actions, and some of the actions include, but not limited to, uploading additional tools that can do more stuff. Remember, in the case of the video we watched, he first of all gained access using iframe, but much later, he didn't tell us what script that he used, but of course, he was encrypting files. Uploading additional tools, using local system tools that you don't need to perhaps bring in tools. There might be tools within the system that are available, right? Certain shells, for example. In the case of Windows, it is CMD or CLI. Okay, CMD, which has a CLI output. CLI is command line interface, right? Then performing ARP scans and ping sweeps. These are very regular things that happen within the network. We explained before now what an ARP is. ARP is Address Resolution Protocol, typically happens when a system in a network attempts to send traffic to somebody within the local environment, not outside, but within its local place, but does not have the MAC address, because within a local network, what is needed to send information to someone would be its identity that is useful locally. That's the MAC address, Media Access Control. But it doesn't have it. So what it normally would do would be to request a resolution, right? That somebody has, usually the default gateway. Please, this is the IP address I have. Do you have a resolution, a table that resolves this IP address to a particular MAC address? If you have, I'm interested in the MAC address. That's the person I want to attempt to reach. And there's also ping sweep, which is more or less like running ping. Typically, pings actually happen targeting one device. But once you do a sweep of ping, you now capture a range of IP addresses, right? And say, okay, I'm going to attempt pinging this. The focus or the goal for ping sweep, you'll be able to identify systems that are responding. Once those systems respond, you know that they are active. And then the next thing you want to check is to find if they have ports or services that are active. Number 4, conducting DNS and directory services enumeration. So typically listing the DNS services that are available and how they work. Then launching brute force attack, performing additional enumeration of users. That's like listing people who are within this place. Okay, who are the potential people that are here? Or who are the people that are here who can serve as potential compromise points or attack surfaces? Users that have created on the system, groups, forests, sensitive data, and unencrypted files. Performing system manipulation using management protocol. Somebody asked the question yesterday how we can actually mitigate one of the attacks, and I said is to implement SNMP, right, which is Simple Network Management Protocol. However, all of these guys have credentials. What we mean by that is each time you attempt to use, or when you join a network, it is for the purpose of enjoying a service. That service is normally hosted by some device, which is called the server. To allow you enjoy that service, there must be some exchange of information that happens from the client to the server. So the server keeps a record of everybody who's in the network that attempts to request that service. Now, at the point of ensuring that you can access it, there are credentials that need to be exchanged. Somebody asking a question? Okay, all right, great. Yeah. So there are credentials that need to be exchanged. Now, those credentials are usually what allows access. We talked about identity and access management yesterday. Now, typically, to be able to allow you use any service, you must be identified. And then for each identity that's created, there are privilege levels given to each of those identities, which is where authorization comes in. So once any service is available, what, particularly for management protocol, what the attacker would want to be doing is to manipulate those credentials. I may want to add a new user, but it may make more sense for me to stay stealth, where I would use somebody who's already existing. It's like stealing somebody's key to enter the house instead of forging another key. Because forging another key might be that the key will be away for a while, right? Depending on the kind of forgery technique you want to do. Why not just, or the house may have 5 keys, right? So instead of forging another key, you take somebody, instead of getting an additional key, 6th key, you take somebody's key and forge the key. So you have the person's copy, right? So that's what we're looking at here, where credentials are compromised. Then executing additional exploits. So you can take several actions through the compromised systems, and it could be configure port forwarding. So this aspect actually focuses more on the network skills. So networking skills, port forwarding is usually where you have a particular port, right, that is serving as a transit point. So imagine that you travel. Most people do travels because of the, I don't know, whether it's the economy or economic importance, there's a lot of travels that we don't have from this part of the world that is straight to certain countries. You have to stop at certain places. The place where you stop, whether it is Egypt or Ethiopia, is more or less like a forwarding port or a forwarding station. So typically, each time traffic is going to a destination, it is directed to now be forwarded by another port to where it is going to. So you may not see the port that is sending it to. Port forwarding is something of that nature. Some, not entirely, but using as an example, creating SSH tunnels or proxies to communicate to the internal server network. So SSH is secure shell, and it is in itself a tunnel, but then it's an encrypted tunnel. It's actually way different from Telnet. Telnet is expected to be obsolete by now. So SSH focuses more on ensuring that there's some form of encryption that happens where traffic that you generate is not, even if somebody were to see it, the person will not be able to unencrypt it. Okay, that's not correct. Okay, well, it's tougher to unencrypt. Okay, then using a VPN to access the internal network. Remember, there was a time in this in one country in the west of Africa, they banned a particular application that was for social media. And it was because the government of that particular country said it was becoming an issue. So what they did was to say, let's ban it. But of course, after locking it, people of that country found a way to accessing that particular social media network by using VPN. So VPN is a virtual private network. How does it work? You're simply taking advantage of infrastructure that exists and then sneaking through it to get to where you're going to. So you can imagine having to go to a particular service somewhere. The owners of the infrastructure of that country stop people from going there. But then internet was still available. Just that it is that particular door that leads to that particular social media platform that was blocked. So people found a way by creating some form of virtual private network using infrastructure that exists already. Okay, so let's dive straight into the reverse shell binding. So reverse and bind shells. Yes, someone has a question. Let me see. What's the use of VPN and its full meaning? So VPN is virtual private network. Its use is to hide what you are sending in using public environment. Whatever you send in the public environment cannot be seen by people in that public environment. It can only be seen between you and the person who you are sending it to. So imagine, I don't know where you stay, but let's assume that we're in Abuja, right? And for some reason, we need to have a meeting, but you don't have a place, I don't have a place for us to have the meeting. We now decide, say, you know what? Let's meet at, I don't know, Kilimanjaro, for example, right? So we go to Kilimanjaro, which happens to not be our infrastructure, it belongs to someone. We sit in the Kilimanjaro, then we are talking. Interesting part is that every other person may be seeing us talk, but the person cannot really decipher what we're discussing, right? So that is like what happens in the VPN, where you use infrastructure that doesn't belong to you to exchange information. Now imagine that we're in that Kilimanjaro and then we build a shield around us. People know that we're here, but there's a shield. The shield does not reveal what we're having a conversation about, right? So that's exactly how it's used. So does it make sense? Sonny, Jennifer? Yeah? Great. So let's move on. Please feel free to bring your questions. Okay, somebody has another. Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so one of the things we talked about earlier was we talked about things that are used, right? We said here, creating a bind or reverse shell. So I'm going to attempt looking at this now, creating a bind or reverse shell, creating and manipulating scheduled jobs and tasks, creating custom daemons and processes, creating new users, and creating additional backdoors. So let's look at that. We're diving straight into this. Now, what is a shell? It may, for those of you who did sciences, perhaps did chemistry, right? You may have come across this word. And this, or let me leave chemistry, more leave out. Let's use everybody here must have seen palm kernel, right? Or must have seen coconut before it is broken. Now, you notice whether it's palm kernel or coconut, or there's this one that is very popular in the north, it's called goruba. Kwakwangoro. Sorry. Kwakwambiri. Sorry. Right? But it's not like a shell. It's like it has an outer part. But then inside that outer part is contained a very nutritious thing, right? Whether it is palm kernel or it is a coconut, right? There is a brown outer part or black outer part, which covers or protects the content in itself. The content is what we're most concerned about. So when we deal with shell in operating systems, particularly these shells are more common with what's it called now? With Linux operating system, right? So the shell actually allows for, let me put it this way. It allows for, let's say, let me put it this way. How do I put it? It allows for sensitive conversations that occur, right, between applications that want to interact with the hardware. So typically, your computer is a hardware, right? But you install in it a software. The software allows you to interact with the capacities of the hardware. Hardware will be like maybe your processor is a hardware, your hard drive, which is for storage, is a hardware, network interface card is a hardware, your RAM is a hardware. However, no matter how good they are, interacting with them will have to be through certain processes which can be understood by some commands. So that's what the shell does. Okay, so a shell is a software, is a utility that acts as an interface between a user and the operating system, right? The operating system has certain services. The kernel is normally the center of the shell. That's where most of the scripts, everything that you do on a computer, the commands, let's put this with scripts or the programs, right? That's what most of them are. However, interacting with the device itself must be on account of what the shell allows. So there are certain shells that don't allow you access to certain kernels. Okay. So in Linux, there are several shell environments. We have the bash or the bash. We have the KSH and then the TSH. And if you have used Linux for a while, right, you must have come across this. There are quite a lot of them, but we just highlighted very few, three of them actually. So your bash is actually named after the person who is it designed? Is it design? Should I call it design? Um, well, let's is it did the guy design it? Well, is yeah, I think it's a guy. His name is Born. His name is what's that his name? Something Born, not Jason Bourne. What's that his name? Forgotten the name. But then he's Born. Something Born, right? It was named after him. Now, it is actually a shell. So this is actually born shell, or it's actually called born again shell. That's the bash. Okay. And it's actually considered the default shell in practically all distributions of Linux, or distros as it is called. Right. The reason is because it supports scripting configurations, as it were. And then also keeps history. That's largely that's what I can remember, you know. Then there's the KSH is actually the K shell. The K shell is simply corn, I think KORN, corn shell. It combines features of for people who have actually done some C programming. It allows for advanced scripting and programming, okay, and is used for a lot of controlling as far as the system is concerned. Then there's the T shell or TC shell, or what we call is an enhanced version of the C shell. There's also the C shell. So these three are very common. So then, remember I mentioned that we are doing reverse and bind of shell. Remember, I also explained that the shell is actually a utility that allows a user to interact with the kernel of the operating system and its services, right? Now, for Windows, we have CLI, and it is invoked by just typing the CMD on your, just search for it. It's an executable command. So Windows PowerShell is newer. Microsoft is a newer Microsoft shell that combines the old CMD functionality with new scripting commands that allows you to interact with it. Now, with a bind and shell, with a bind shell or reverse and bind shell approach, the attacker, right, or the threat actor, opens a port. We discussed what a port is, and it's very important for people who have not interacted with networking to actually go and read transport layer, right, of the networking, because transport layer captures what port, the essence of ports. To just help communicate the point, let me say ports would be, for the purpose of trying to explain, they'll be like shops where certain services are sold. Now, when you join a network, you join a network to use a service, right? Now, the service could be anything, could be mail services, could be web services, could be name resolution services, and a plethora of other services. However, each of these services have a rule that govern how they should be done. These rules are called protocols. These protocols are only active at certain opening points or gates. So whenever you are looking at using mail, for example, the protocol for you for mail cannot be the protocol for web. So because of that, we identify a certain gate or entry point that allows you access to the service mail. That gate or that door is called a port, right? So what this attacker does is that he opens a port, right, and begins to listen, or he waits for a connection. Now, let me explain why. In the case of a network, interacting with a service on the server would have to be initiated by the client, who sends a synchronization request wanting to use that service, right? we can't get tired of saying this because this is the place where most of the attack happens. If there was no network, no attack would happen. The fact that we have to leave the comfort of our system to go to use the service on another system is what attackers take advantage of. Then they compromise that interaction and assume the posture of either the client requesting service or the server giving service. Or they can intercept the process and make it stay for longer with the view of compromising and taking advantage of the device that is sending the request or the device that is responding to the request. Okay, so what the attacker does is that he initiates a port and he's waiting to see the next request that is going to be going to a particular service or that particular device. So what they do is that they bind that shell. That particular shell is tied. Okay, is it tied now? Yes, sort of like is those of you guys that like prayer, you bind, I bind, I bind. Not like it is bad because I like prayer myself. But typically, that's what it is. So a port actually listens, right? And he's typically, yes, somebody's asking a question. You talk more about WMI that are the way arms of, sorry. You talk about WMI. What are the main arms of, sorry, I don't get what you're saying. Did I say anything about WMI? What's WMI? Maybe please help me out. Maybe what you typed in a hurry and didn't type it, or look at what you typed. I don't seem to understand what you're typing. Or you want to say what you're asking so that I can hear you. I think your mic is unmuted. Okay. Okay, he's deleted it. Okay, so maybe it's a mistake. All right, great. Because I didn't understand what you typed. I don't think I've said anything about WMI, have I? Okay, is it Windows Management Interface? What is WMI? No, okay, no, okay. I suspect. Please stay here. Let's say attend like 4 classes. Because I don't know. I started thinking maybe whether WMI is a new one like Windows Management Interface. I started cracking my head. All right, so let's get back to it. So the attacker, right? In the case of how this bind shell works, he opens the port and is waiting for an incoming connection. Right? So the exchange that occurs between each of these systems normally, so again, we must identify networks. Each time traffic is initiated by the sender or by the client, right? There is a structure it takes. Of course, there will be the source address, whether it is port address, IP address, or MAC address. But most importantly will be the data that it is sending. Because in the data that it is sending, it indicates what it wants to do, right? The type of the traffic. Is it a request? Is it a response? Is it determination and all of those things? So typically what the attacker is waiting for is that he wants to carry that open shell and replace it or consume what is coming. Okay, so he bypasses any other thing, say maybe whatever configuration that you have. Because, of course, whatever conversation has been happening between a client and a server is what has been allowed. So he's just going to take advantage of that particular person. So he's listening and then goes ahead to handle it. So that's what the first stage of it is to first of all reverse the shell. Then the second one is to bind the shell. So in what he does in this case is that now that the listener is on, right, whichever the specific port is, the moment the target system or machine runs any kind of interaction within it and the service that is attempting to reach, the attacker will connect to that machine and then open that port, and then that's it. Begins to act like the guy. So somebody may call it man in the middle attack. Yeah. So that is like in this case now. So this is the attacker. Now, this particular system is listening on port 1, 2, 3, 4. The attacker connects to the victim and is waiting on that listening port. So let me see if I can show something quickly. Hold on. Just to help explain what I'm trying to say. CMD. Hold on, please. Let's see. So, okay, great. So let me try to share this guy. Hold on. Let me share my command prompt and let's see what I can achieve. I hope I didn't test this before now. This is a very dangerous thing to try. Okay, so let's say net start, right? So let me see the statistics of my network. Oops. So we say net. Okay, net start. Net Start, net statistics. So as it stands, this is my system. These are active connections. This one's here. Okay, great. We are seeing, I'm going to explain to you very shortly. I'm waiting to see one. Okay, all of them are, okay. Hopefully, just hold on. I think you can see the display on the screen. I didn't just initiate a connection. If I did, then, okay, great. I think I'm good. No, I need one. I need one more. What I'm looking for is not there. You'd have seen listening, then you see. So let me just end this, right? From this output on the screen, this is my system. I'm showing the statistics of the connection that exists between my system and the network connection that exists between my system, which would naturally highlight my system and another system, right? So if you look at this here, from this point here to here, they're just my system within itself, and it's showing 127.0.0.1. For those of you who are into networks, you'll understand that this is a loop back, simply a utility that allows for me to test the connectivity or no, not connectivity, to test the continuity of traffic within my card. Excuse me, right? Now, but look at here. This is a HTTPS. Now, this is my system, 192.168.1.113. This is my IP address, and this is my port number. Okay. Now, these port numbers are categorized into three: well-known, registered, and then dynamic. Now, if you use any service that is very popular, those ones are categorized under well-known. Any service that is perhaps developed by a specific vendor, but is not well known, they can approach this authorizing body and they are granted a port number allocated to them. That is within the registered. People like Cisco, Microsoft, AWS, and the rest of them, they have their own port numbers for the purpose of people using their services. So they are allocated that. However, the last range, which is the dynamic, is where every device that intends to connect to any service, whether it is registered or well-known, would have to generate a port number. So my device falls under there, right? So this is the port number carried from there. The combination of this IP address and the port number is called a socket, right? Now this port is now opened or is initiated for connecting to this service. This service is HTTPS. That service is on this particular IP address. I don't know who that is. Perhaps it's perhaps what's it called? Zoom. I don't know. Right? But as it stands, the status of that connection is established, meaning as we speak, my device and that service on that site are locked and conversations are ongoing. So that cannot be attacked. Now, usually what is happening, observe this now, this is one, it is closed and it's in waiting state. I don't know who that is, right? I don't know who this person is. This particular site, perhaps this is a version 6 IP address for that particular site, right? So you see established, but then these ones are closed and wait. So it's simply saying that this one is closed and is waiting. Now, if I were to initiate a conversation, right, with this particular site, I don't know what the service is. What I will see would be my system opening that particular service, waiting. Sometimes you may see open, then open wait, and then close wait, and then establish. Naturally, establish is what we're looking at. This means that your device has now connected to that service, right? So what the attacker, in the case of what we're discussing here, is that the attacker attempts to look at, there are two processes. Number one, it will reverse the shell. Number two, it will bind the shell. Reversing the shell is simply assuming the posture of the person who is initiating that connection, right? So he opens the port. What the attacker does is that he does a scan of the ports that are open on this my device and finds the one that I'm about to initiate connection to a particular server or service on, then he will now assume my posture. That's where he binds. Okay, so that's exactly how it works, right? I think that's caused the point. So let me die. Oh yeah, nice. I'll read out what you're saying. Let me quickly just share my slide. Nice. So somebody is saying that I create payload to the victim machine. I will successfully inject into the victim machine because he's using Windows 7, but I tried to do same to victim machine that use Windows 8. I couldn't inject the payload to the system because of the security of the Windows 8. So how can I bypass? I can't tell you how to bypass it. Just like you said, as it stands, there is a security feature. Please note that I think to a large degree, we seem to be of the opinion, a great number of people who pursue this track seem to be of the opinion that we are giving license to people to go ahead and deal with stuff. People can meet you and say, somebody hijacked that. Please, there's something we explained at the beginning. As a pen tester, interacting with somebody, there are legal aspects to this. Excuse me, I told us to read there are two documents. We have our own NDPR document in Nigeria, and quite a number of documents are actually also in the offing were available. Now, when you commit crime, you know say who you are. There's NDPR, right, which is drafted after the framework of the GDPR, which is Global Data Protection, Global General Data Protection, right? The NDPR is Nigeria. Then we also have a cybersecurity law of 2015. Please look at it, though. I like what you're doing. The payload here simply suggests that you created a script or created a particular attack tool, and you were able to insert it or inject it into someone's system. And you mentioned the reason why. Windows 7, right, is an older system. The support for Windows 7 is not as there as it should be. This is why most times people are told to leave those old systems. Of course, some people have some attachment to these old operating systems and they use it now and again. But please observe that Windows 8 you could not. Now, bypassing the security, I think you can read that up somewhere. I won't be found to be the one telling you how that happens. Read that up. You can always, what you've just done now, just ask somewhere in certain fora. They are going to give you some answers. But simply put, Windows 8 is more secure than Windows 7. That's why. So there are certain features within the operating system of Windows 8 that does not allow some of these, weaknesses. We talked about things that can happen here. Taking advantage of configuration flaws, right, can lead to some of this. So typically, if my configuration flaws are handled, then that means that you can't take advantage of it. So let's take it that, hey, you lost there, right? But you can do more work. Somebody asked a question in the group, so I'm actually attending to the question now. Question was actually to everyone. I'm sure you all can see it, right? My guy, FL Sound. So thank you. So typically, this is how it works. Okay, let's dive into it. So the reverse shell is a vulnerability in which an attacking system has a listener port open and the victim initiates a connection back to the system. So this is, so in this case, where are we? So, okay, so the tool you can use here is Metasploit, or, and then Netcat. Netcat is good. Again, these are all Linux-based utility. So bind the shell or reverse the shell. The reverse the shell in this case is the compromised system has a port, or the attacker has a port on his device and is listening on it, and then this compromised system attempts to connect to it. Then bam, everything is gone. Okay, so an attacker could use this command, right? nc-lvp123 in the compromised system, right? And create a listener port of 1234 and execute -e. The bash. Bash is your bourne shell, right? That's the configuration file. And it's demonstrated here. So you can look at that in the activities in the curriculum. Once the attacker connects to the victim, can go ahead and do your list or ls, and it will list every other thing that are there. In this case, this is a particular preset lab environment. So you can see a doc, PDF, or a text. All of these are available there. So you can go ahead and, see the screen of the person who's attacked. When the attacker connects, the highlighted message in the example below is displayed in the victim system. So connect to this from unknown on this port. So this connected to this particular system from an unknown guy on this port. So one of the challenges of using bind shell is that if the victim system is behind firewall, the listening port might be blocked. So that explains to you what happened with the Windows 7 and Windows 8. However, if the victim system can initiate a connection to the attacking system, which is the reverse on a given port, a reverse shell can be used to overcome this challenge. Okay, so FL Sound, that's what you can do. So this is like a display, and this is an activity. So you will need to have that tool, Netcat, okay, or Metasploit installed and follow. There's a lab manual in the curriculum for that. So these are commands that actually can achieve that. To be able to use netcat to TCP port, that's the command. Listening on a given TCP port, that's the command. Using a transfer file, that's the command. So this is where you now put the payload, just like you explained, right? FL sound. Connecting to the receiving, connecting and receiving a web page, that's the command. Using netcat as port number, that's the command. So these are also commands on Metasploit. Yeah. The Meterpreter module of the Metasploit framework can be used to create and bind reverse shell and to perform numerous and other post-exploitation tasks. So these are commands that can be used. So cat, cd, print, cat, current directory, print working directory, and list. They are the same as ones in Linux or Unix based. So these are the commands that you can use on Metapreter. Please note that this is actually on this particular utility can actually work on Metasploit or on Linux environment where you activate the service, the utility Metasploit, right? So these are commands. I'll just go through them. So when you are doing the recording, when you are going through recording, you can look at your webcam, a web snap, and the rest of them, right? So let's look at command and control of others using that as a utility. Now, remember the command and control, we talked about it before. Now, attackers often use command and control, which is referred to as C&C. The most common is C&C. They use that to send commands and instructions to compromise systems. Like the video we watched, the guy didn't mention it, but apparently that's what happened. Of course, he injected or inserted a particular frame into the browser. Somebody picked it, and he got a notification back, simply indicating that that script had a way of reporting back to the person who created it. So it's like a spy. Okay. So the CNC, yeah. Okay. I intend using my second laptop as a target. So do I need to install Metasploit? Yes. On who? Your system. No, the system that is attacking is the one that you need to have Metasploit on. No, not on the target. You don't need Metasploit on the target. Metasploit is on your own system. What happened after gaining access to the host system on a case where the victim used a virtual machine? So remember that usually that is why most attackers use virtual machines, right? So remember that your virtual machine is the host. So let's paint the picture this way. You come to my house to live. You didn't come with your dog. I have a dog. You didn't come with your gun. I have a gun. No, I'm just saying, I know they talk say I get gun. I'm saying, let's say I have a gun and then I have a dog. But you are now my host. You are now my host. If you are living in my house and somebody is attempting to attack you, you know that my own security would work for you, though you didn't come with yours. So this is the reason why most people use virtual machines for this. Most of the attacks that occur are done from virtualization platforms. You understand? So in that case, except of course you have tools that are able to gather this meta information that indicate to you that this guy is hiding from somewhere. Then you are able to exfiltrate some of this information and launch the attack at compromising the host system's security feature. Good. Apart from that, within my knowledge, I'm still growing in the field, Sha. There's nothing you can do. So JB, you got it? So once you come to my house as my guest, right, and I'm the host, all of my services work for you. Then carry light from my house, you get light. At best, you can come with your own small touchlight, right? But even at that, yeah, you're welcome, boss. All right, so let's move on. I think I like today's class. The interactions are encouraging. Just that our time will soon finish and we'll not finish all of what we're dealing with. It's okay. So you guys can read. So the CNC system can be the attacker system. For example, it could be a desktop or a laptop or a dedicated virtual or physical server. Now, the guy who is initiating the attack creates a hidden channel, a covert channel with the compromised system that is an adversarial technique that allows the attacker to transfer information, objects between processes or systems that, according to a security policy, are not supposed to be allowed to communicate. See, let me also say this again. I don't know. So let me just say hypothetically, not like on authority, say stats. There's no stats to explain this, but from interactions, right, and from reading, we learned that most of these attacks that occur happen to people that, one, do not adhere to policies. What are the policies? Some organizations say that if you do not have, or some organizations don't even have policies, there are certain standards, but they are blanket policies. One of which is, please don't try to use free applications. People don't like it. Because I was talking in a class, today is Saturday. I had a class on Thursday morning, and on Thursday I was having a conversation with some of my students, and I explained to them we're dealing with security. And I was explaining to them, all right, it's not fair. If you are big boy enough to get a laptop, be big boy enough to get the applications, or forget about it. And the guy's like, man, okay, these applications are usually very expensive. So the easiest way is to use those free ones. That's okay. It solves your initial problem, but it compromises your entire system, right? Always, always. This particular command and control, remember that one of the first things that the attacker will do is to do some form of intel gathering. The first step to any security attack or cybersecurity attack is to do reconnaissance, which is where you do intelligence gathering. You launch tools that go to meet a target and find out what responses it is getting from whoever. The responses could be coming from IP addresses or could be coming from port. So you can do port scans or ping sweep. Whichever the case is, you get a response. The next thing is to now find out whether those ports or those IP addresses are responding to requests made. The first was just a ping, which is like a knock or a tap. The second is to find out whether there are ports that are responding, right, trying to initiate conversation. Once I find out those ports, the next thing is to observe. These ports if the ports are responding and there is a policy that protects them, then there's nothing I can do in the case of Windows 7 and 8, like FL Sound just said. But if there's nothing protecting me and I'm initiating or a particular port is open for conversation, then I am gone. And please note, no matter how tiny that opening is, all I need is just a port. I can go ahead and structure my target, my payload to look like what is allowed on that gate. So let's say, for example, right? I feel some kind of nudge to just get inspired. I'm going to attempt to explain this not using the technical terms. So let's say there's a particular door, right? They say tall people should not come to no, let's say, God, make I not talk like this. Dark people, make I not talk tall or short. Because if I talk tall or short now, I might buy job. So let's say they say dark people should not come to a particular door, inferring that all we need is light people. Do you know that before you know what's happening, everybody will become light and will pass through that door, especially if there are certain benefits attached to that door? Everybody will just become light. And there are lots of ways to become light. If you buy cream rub, I can do makeup and be light, right? So typically, I'm now imitating what is permitted at that door. So there's a policy, yes. But now, for me to pass through that place, I now imitate that policy. The same thing happened to people faking visas up and down. People arranging passports up and down. There's policy, but people still find their way. You get simply saying, and typically they can either compromise somebody in that office or that particular door, or even attempt to sneak past whatever is there. So that is why in this case, the command and control guy attempts to initiate a covert channel, a path of communication. This time around, usually, right, taking advantage of objects that exist between systems or processes that, according to security policy, are not supposed to be allowed to communicate. So attackers often use virtual machines. JB, remember the question you were asking? They use virtual machines either from their own end or from a virtual cloud. So there are lots of people who host services with AWS who are using paid services, but are using it to launch attacks. Okay, or I mentioned AWS, but I'm saying who buy slots or buy services, pay for services on some very big cloud service providers. Or they can use other compromised systems as a server, right? So even services such as Twitter, Dropbox, Photobucket have been used for this command and control. So I can go ahead, and just send you a link to a particular file. Because people always say, upload the video and send me a link. Now it's cheap, better than copying on a flash. Makes sense. But what if I'm actually targeting you? So let's say you work with finance, and I'm targeting your organization. We're friends. Maybe we've just become friends. Now, I don't know, unknown to you, I'm targeting your organization where you work. Maybe you work with revenue services. Maybe you work with finance. Maybe you work, I don't know, but shall I use systems? And we now meet on this platform. And hey, what's up, man? That was great. You know, oh yeah, we're good friends. Oh yeah, how's the family doing? Oh wow, nice dog there, nice children. Oh wow, all of these are just social engineering targeted at ensuring that I get you compromised. And then, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, do you have recording, Mr. Chess class? Oh yeah, I do. In short, he sent them to me. Oh cool, but I don't have them on my system. I have a link. I can just send it to you innocently, and then he sent to you, and you click on it and download it, and then you are redirected or compromised, right? Or embedded. I think there's something, I think part of this course, was it here? There's something called steganography, right? In short, I did a study on it some years ago, and I had to ask myself certain questions like, wow, it dates back as far back as I can't say prehistoric, is as in far back, where people use pictures. They hide codes in pictures. In short, there was cases of people having slaves. They will shave the slave's head, draw the message, usually in the case of war or trying to do some espionage. They'll scrape a slave's head, write the message on his head, then allow the head to grow back. Then send the slave, and since the slave, send the slave on an errand. He gets to the person he's sending to, that person will scrape the head and then look at the picture, then decipher. As in mad approach. Okay, so we're going to get to steganography very shortly. Hopefully, if we don't, then you guys read about it. So the command and control communication can be as simple as maintaining a timed beacon or heartbeat or launched additional attack or for data exfiltration. So typically, you know how a beacon works? Is like a transmitter. You know when you have a tracker on your car, right? It's simply, or you know what happens with the case of your car key and the car, right? That has a remote or a sensor, is that you can stay somewhere, and because that car, as long as there's battery in the car and battery on your phone, there are certain signals that are being sent that synchronize on a particular frequency that both devices are listening to the key and the car. So once you initiate a particular call, the other guy responds. So typically that's how this works. It's just like a beacon or a heartbeat. So typically say, hey, how far? I did here, oh, blinking, blinking. And once I call it up, I get a response. That simply means that my stuff is working on that device. Okay, so let's move on. So this is how some of the command and control. So this is the guy, right, who's launching the attack, right? And these are the devices that he wants to compromise. However, this is the guy that he's using. So when you trace it, this is the guy you catch. You can't catch this guy. He shall connects by whatever means. Could be that this guy downloaded an update, collected a link, clicked on a link of an Excel file. It can be very possible in recent times. For those of you who work with the federal government, there was a time when they sent a link saying that people should click on it and go ahead and populate or update their IPPIS information, right? And it was dropped on very plenty platforms, and typical of civil servants, they were all panicking because typically what they are looking at is their salary. So I beg you, everybody was clicking on it. A great number of people did not click until much later when they got clearance. All of those charade that happened then has now been debunked. As well, is it debunked? Has been thrown away because those category of people are moving to another payment platform. So there, somebody can go ahead and do that. I cited an example. We have a new minister of education now. What if the new minister of education comes into the office and somebody wants to take advantage of it, say, hey, this guy has not sent any communication to everybody. And maybe there's a particular email, right, that was created for him or not. And typical of these climbs, once a new person comes into office, everything becomes new. So it could just be that it's a new email, not coming from the minister, maybe minister.ed.edu, no, yes, minister.edu.ng, maybe, right? I send a mail to all people and saying, this is a mail from the Minister of Education requesting that he's very great about blah, blah, blah. And, you know, in his own bid to whatever story, you just click on the link share and then you download an Excel sheet, you know, unknown to you, you downloaded the file. But then alongside with it, there are some other things you've actually installed, which is a payload of the command and control attacker. So let's say that's what happens to this guy. And naturally, this guy would interact with this system and this system. So this guy is the person issuing the command to these other devices. When we say something is compromised, what exactly are we saying? Again, the policy guiding that service, the protocol guiding that service might not have been adhered to. So as a result, certain ports are open. To scrub most of these things, people are told every port that you have, right? Remember, we'll explain what a port is. Every port that you have that you are not using, that is not in use, right? Please disable it. People have a knack of just installing certain applications without disabling certain features. Go to the settings and disable certain features that you are not using, especially services that have to serve networks. Disable them. So if there are certain services, maybe I install an application here, by default, certain features are activated. Let's say DHCP, for example. Some of the HTTP, whereas I'm installing it for a certain use, just client-side use. And I go ahead and I forget to uncheck those other services. And so those services are distributing their product, or their product, as it were, on certain ports. So those ports are opening, they are listening, just that nobody has connected to them yet. So this guy does a scan of the ports that are available, that are there by default, but have not been, aligned to the policy of the organization, and then take advantage of it and control. So these are commands that can be used. Many different techniques and utilities can be used to create a command and control or C2 attack. The following table show some examples for some information. There's SOCAT and the rest of them, right? So when you get to this part of the video, you can go ahead and click on it. Right? Nobody. Okay, I thought somebody had a question. So far, so good. Any questions so far? None. All right. So the following figure shows an example of how Trevor C2, so it's an application, can be used as a C2 framework. So the terminal window on the left is the attacker system, and then the terminal window on the right is the victim client. So this is the window. So schedule job task. Windows has a command that attackers can use to schedule automated execution of tasks on a local or remote system. Now, let me tell you one of the biggest challenge with Windows operating system is that there are lots of processes that are running which happen to be dependencies for other applications. This might not be the best example, but let me attempt to say this. Say if you want to watch a video, for example, you need your sound card to work for you to optimize watching the video, right? You need your graphic card to work. So there are certain processes that are there for this particular system, which you did not initiate. But the fact that you clicked on a movie to watch and the codecs or the applications that are supposed to make that video playable for you would invoke all of these other services. So those services are active. So there are some applications you launch and you notice that your CPU begins to initiate some serious cycles per second. You hear, now, so that's like an example. So picture a Windows environment where you didn't activate a particular service, but it is active by reason of you powering the system. Some applications are there and they are active at boot. Some applications are activated because certain dependencies would have to use them. So those functionalities are usually very open. So those services are automated. Those services themselves, not to talk of certain execution of some tasks, right? Say update, for example. No, updates supposed to happen. Certain applications are primed to generate their updates. In the Linux environment, you go ahead and do your yum install or apt-get and the rest of them. Or in this case, this one's just happen on themselves. So you can use the functionalities that occur, right, or that exist in the Windows environment, right, for the purpose of automated execution. You can use them for post-exploitation and persistence. So I can sit on your system for a while. So you can take advantage of the Windows task scheduler to bypass UAC, right? And, sorry, excuse me. If the user has access to the graphical interface, right? This is possible because the security option runs with the system's highest privileges in the case of Windows. So that's why most of the people that face the most attacks are Windows. But, typically, we don't want stress. We want to just, not everybody is a geek. Those of you who have managed to come into this class, you're on your way, you are in Geek 101. We're pushing you to a point where we're advising that you begin to become somebody who has control over what you use. Don't let it be automated. Because once it's automated, it means somebody is running it through a script which you didn't contribute to, but then you don't know how many doors are left open because it is automated. But if you're the one who is initiating it, then of course you know what you're doing. I always like to say this is like on the side, right? As long as you're not cooking your food, right? Then you are left with what you're using. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So there's a yes, you must. We're going to get there. I'm hoping we do. But if you guys are looking at your chat in the chat, FL Sound just posted something. Said I talked about steganography, that he tried it by attaching a bash script. So bash script is the configuration file, a script that is written configuration. Some of them are executive in nature. Some of them are just read only, right? That he attached it to a picture, right? To his second computer. It worked, but you must get the password to extract the script. So that's the idea. Steganography was largely for the purpose of sending coded messages. They were used between rulers or captains of armies, or perhaps people plotting coup. Now, typically back in the day, if you watch old movies, people always marked their territories by lifting up flags. So there's a way, those flags are just to tell you that if you try this territory, the person who is known to be the commander behind this flag will deal with you. So territories are marked. So if somebody was walking through a place, they can stop you and caution you and ask you, where are you going to? Now, the more control you have over resources like food, land, and the rest of them, iron back in the day, right, suggests that you're a big king. Now, there are some times where you begin to fear that people are trying to usurp your authority or perhaps even compromise your authority over such land. So people stopped working plainly. So typically they sent, there were even cases of people using milk, right, to write on a traveling bag, like bag for water, just to be able to pass. Because once you are passing, they will search you, and once they find anything not in compliance with that king whose banner is flying around the environment, you are considered a traitor and they will lock you up. You just sit down until you wait until the day that there's court. So most of the times, it is expected that we have discussed within ourselves. There's what is called a cipher. The cipher is what was used to lock and would also be used to unlock. That's what you're calling a password. Now, that cipher is very important. Both the sender of any steganographic, okay, so I think it's stegano. Stegano means hidden. Graphy is like study of, right? If I get that right. Stegano, I think is Greek, if I can remember, right? So it's simply saying a write-up that is hidden from plain sight. So if the both of us have to agree on anything hidden that's going to be exchanged between the both of us, then of course, both of us have agreed on what is going to be used. So you know the cipher. I also know the cipher. So once you send it to me, I can use the cipher to extract, right? So for those of you who grew up in the North, there's one language we used to speak like that. You know, if you want Moje in Hausa language is like, let's go, right? Then they add a particular character to it to make it look like it is not readable. You're not going to be readable. So when you are around people who are elderly, who don't know you, younger people back in the day used to do it. So when you want to say, let us go. So, okay, so I'm going to answer your question shortly. So, Johnson, I'm going to answer your question shortly. So we use such kind of things. We just add a cipher to it to make it unreadable by anybody who intercepts it. So when somebody wants to say, let us go, you hear somebody say, Mubu Jebe. Now that's they add a boo or a B to everything. So mu. The B would be imitating the vowel after the mu. So it's mu, boo. J, that's J-E, which is the E, which is the vowel after the J, which is let's go. Will be now the B will now be, so we can try to say it's K that we're using that is our cipher. Could be N, munu, Jene, right? We could decide to use whatever the cipher is for that day. Now, the question you were asking, Adonu, is how do you get the password when you're on remote access? So please note, remote access, the steganography is not like an attack per se, okay, or could be an attack. Remember that the focus here is the command and control guy. He's attempting to take advantage or take over your system. He wants to gain access. So I can post a picture in a WhatsApp group and you click on the picture to watch it or to look at the picture and you have downloaded the script on your system. It's not for you to decipher the picture, you have seen it, but I've hidden a script in the picture. However, I want to take advantage of your system. So where I am seated, once that script is on your computer or on your laptop, I get a beacon telling me that it is landed. So I am seated remotely and I am the person who developed that script. So I can talk to my guy. who's giving me opportunity. That application allows me interaction with it. I can run the scan, find out what ports are open, and then launch the attack against your system. So Johnson, that's how it works. So it's not to say if I'm going to be the original intent of steganography was just a way to hide what we consider very important messages, right, to the person who is with me. So we already have to agree on a cipher. We know for cryptographic to work, we have two patterns. There's the come on, Oche. There's a waiting with those two cryptography now. I'm talking outside what I plan to deliver, but it's okay. Hey, what are the two now? Lord have mercy. Somebody help me. Hey, see the word though. I can see it, but to pronounce it, the thing on the run from my head. Somebody help me. Cryptography, there are two types. Che, cyber security guys, more gonna help me. When I teach, I don't look, you don't look.
Is it the asymmetric and the
Thank
symmetric?
you. God bless you. Who talks so? You go hammer.
It's
What?
actually called about music.
You go hammer. You go hammer. The thing just lock. Yes, symmetric and asymmetric. So one requires that the key is the same for both of us. The other requires that the key is different. There's a public key and there's a private key. So the mechanic of implementing those keys is what we have agreed on. You get my point? So knowing whatever is used in the case of steganography is dependent on the cipher that we have agreed on. So there's usually a plain text, then there's the algorithm, or which is a cipher, right? Which is, of course, the cipher is going to be what we've agreed upon step by step, which is usually an algorithm that is written for encrypting, is applied to the plain text, and then that thing becomes encrypted. So it is encrypted now. Whilst it is passing, nobody can see it except the person who has the cipher. So when you look at the file, you can tell that certain ciphers are here. There are lots of people who actually do. In short, there are books that are written even today that are meant for some very cipher-driven guys. If you listen to certain rap music, you notice there are certain questions, that certain communications are being done. This is, by the way, in the wake of PDD's arrest. That was when people started noticing that a particular rap that was released sometime, the guy was talking about these things. That was way, way after. Basically, that's how it works. So let's do and dive back into slides before time is out. So I guess I've been able to communicate to you. I hope I pronounce the name well because I call the name like saying, let me give you the name. So Johnson, so it's good, yeah? Okay, so I take it that, yeah. Cool. All right. So in the case of Windows environment, that's one of the biggest challenges, the fact that the Windows environment already exists with scheduled by themselves automated execution commands. So which work on local or remote devices. So attackers take advantage of all of this. So we can bypass the user access control, user account control, right? Which is actually a framework for all of those login details. Typically is for Microsoft Windows, right? They use that to help prevent unauthorized access, or maybe an unauthorized access or a particular application attempting to. You notice once in a while, once you're attempting to open an application, you see a prompt saying, this application is attempting to interact with so and so on your hard drive. Would you want to? That is from the user account control center. Okay, so this is possible because the security option runs with the system's highest privilege. Every account you create by default, except of course, you go ahead to create other accounts and then limit their privileges. By default, the first installation on your system, of course, is not the administrator. You can assign that, but it comes with the highest privilege. So you go ahead and reduce. When a Windows user creates a new task, the system typically doesn't require the user to authenticate with an administrator account. So typically, but of course, we're advised that it is safe to have an account that's considered administrator and not to be used often, then leave the other one guest or whatever, let people use it. So you realize usually once those other accounts have been created, the privileges are limited. Once you call it a guest, it drops. So you can't install, or depending on what you do, you may decide that nobody should install from the guest and so on and so forth. Right. So you can access the scheduled task of a Windows system by navigating to Start, Administrative Tools, and then Task Scheduler. So you see a lot of those tasks there. Alternatively, you can press Windows key plus R to open the run dialog box, and then from there type your tasks. So task chd.msc, which is taskscheduler.microsoft, and press enter. Schedule tasks can also be used to steal data over time without raising alarm. In Windows, task schedulers can be leveraged to create or schedule jobs that may use a significant amount of your CPU resources and network bandwidth. And this is helpful when huge files are to be compressed and transferred over a network, especially if you set them to execute at night or during weekends when no user will be on the victim system. So somebody mentioned this sometime. There's a particular place, I'm not at liberty to say, that they observed that at a certain time of the day, like 11 p.m. in the night, you notice that all the systems just begin to work. They do that for like about 30 minutes there, but then they all calm down. And that they noticed by the time they traced it, the systems are sending something to some place in Asia. They now realized that the people that came to do the installation were actually people from that part of the world. I say we're not ready. When we're ready, we play too much. We will understand. Next, we're looking at custom daemons, processes, and additional backdoors. Much as somebody's asking a question, I beg you. I beg you. Much as with scheduled tasks, you can create your own custom daemons or services and processes on the victim system, as well as additional backdoors. Whenever possible, a backdoor must survive reboot to maintain persistence on the victim system. Those of you that use cracked applications, most of your crack is like this. Imagine you are playing a football match and you approach somebody from the other team and say, guy, you are the guy who we want to use to win your team. Normally, your alawi will be $15,000 a week. We are willing to give you $25,000. And then we'll double that for each time you do it. So all you need to do is stand on the line of defense. We have been practicing. Make sure you stand to the left. I've been practicing. The moment the guy is going to kick the ball, you jump as if you are jumping to protect the ball. But shall give space. We are going to attempt to play the ball through that point. And because you are standing there, your goalkeeper will not attempt to want to catch the ball through that point. So it will be our blind spot and we can score. What I just painted to you is exactly what cracks do for your applications. So expectedly, the crack would go and sit on the line of defense of the application. Then each time he sees his fellow approaching, it will dock. Then your guy did it. When you check, your application is doing very fine, but then that place is open, right? So that way it is avoiding being detected, right, and so on. So daemons can persist on the system to either further compromise other systems or exfiltrate data. So other systems are lateral, which is at the same level, or what we call horizontal movement, right? There's vertical, which is where you move to escalate person's privileges or application privileges or system privileges to a higher one. So let's go on to new users. After you compromise the system, if you obtain administrator access to the system, you can create additional accounts. And these accounts can be used to connect to and interact with victim systems, just as it is a best practice when configuring user accounts under normal circumstances. As an attacker, you should create those alternate accounts with complex passwords, right? So typically, it should not be what can be. Remember, this is attacking and gaining foothold. So looking at ways to just remain persistent. So let's dive into the part that I'm hoping we'll look at and attempt to conclude on. If we don't, of course, anything from here is not much anymore. I've actually done, during my introduction, I've said a lot about all of this. So understanding how to perform lateral movement, detection, avoidance, and enumeration. So lateral movement is typically saying that we're at the same level. Systems that are the same level with me, I'm able to go ahead to expand the compromise to all of them, right? Then detection avoidance is simply saying, now that it has happened, how can I not be detected? Remember in the case of the video we watched, right? The guy was able to avoid being detected because his code or his script was hanging inside what the people in the company did not consider to be a threat, which was a thermostat, right? But whereas it was part of the network. The enumeration is listing all the things that are core in this environment. So lateral movement, also referred to as pivoting, is a post-exploitation technique that can be performed using many different methods. The main goal of lateral movement is to move from one device to another while avoiding detection, or for the purpose of avoiding detection. Now, after doing that, you steal sensitive data. While stealing that, you maintain access to that particular device that is your mainstay. Once you found the main door, the tendency of you always using that door is very high. So then to exfiltrate sensitive data, which is data whose theft would have a severe impact on an organization. So any information or what, now please note, data is considered asset. I said that earlier. Data is considered the next crude because like a milk, it's on the basis of data that a lot of things can be done. The recently concluded elections in the United States, though a lot of people don't like it, it's on the grounds of the fact that one team used data. The other guys were blabbing, right? Now, so such data, sensitive data, which can be used to compromise the organization's impact, right, typically should not be broadly shared internally or externally. This is why, you see, tools like Whois is a public tool. But imagine that you work in an organization and then you use the Whois to get certain information as a cybersecurity person. Then you copy that information and paste in a group, right? By so doing, what we're going to be penalizing you for is not that the tool is free, but the fact that the tool gave you access to information that are considered sensitive, and then you posted it on a public platform. And on that platform, we don't know who is who, right? So access to sensitive data should be limited and tightly controlled, typically, right? So data exfiltration is the act of deliberately moving sensitive data from inside an organization to outside an organization's perimeter without permission. We talked about scope at the beginning of our class. Very important, get your scope, particularly once you are engaged. Ask, what is my area of reach? That's your scope. The area for which you have permission to penetrate using tools or using your skill as a pen tester. Now, lateral movement involves scanning a network for other systems like your own who are compromised, right, who have weaknesses, and exploiting the weaknesses in those systems while compromising their credentials and collecting sensitive information for the purpose of exfiltrating. You take sensitive data from there outside. Lateral movement is possible in an organization that does not have a properly segmented network. For those of you who are into network segmentation is very key. It looks like one of those very basic things that people do, but it drops to a large percentage the level of attack that needs to happen. So let's paint it this way. Imagine that you have a house and the house is flat, one room, no curtains, no doors, right? Where you ease yourself is also no doors, no curtain. Where you fry the chicken and eggs, plain, right? That also suggests that where you keep sensitive information like documents or perhaps, vital things are also plain. If an attacker walks into that room, everything is in plain sight. But imagine if all the rooms or that particular flat room was partitioned into smaller rooms, with each room having specific information as peculiar to that room. So it will mean the person will need to identify the room, then go there and identify the information. So for network, it is very important to segment them because it limits access. One, it also contains, with respect to performance of the network, it allows you to, narrow down problems in a particular sector or segment to that segment without affecting every other person. So network segmentation is therefore very important. Testing the effectiveness of your network segmentation strategy is very important. Your organization might have deployed virtual or physical firewalls, right? VLANs or virtual local area networks, or access control policies for segmentation. So each segment should have their own policy. As long as as much as the organization will have its policy for everybody, each segment should have their own policy, right? So you could have micro segmentation in a virtualized or containerized environment, in which case you are using services that are hosted some places. Either which way, there must be policies for each segment. You should perform network segmentation testing often to verify that your segmentation strategy is appropriate to protect your network against lateral movement and other post-exploitation attacks. Note, the lateral movement is moving from one system to the other in a network to identify weaknesses that exist in the other devices and compromising them. So if it is segmented, that movement is contained within wherever that issue happened, right? So after compromising a system, you can use basic port scans to identify systems or services of interest that you can further attack to compromise valuable information, like in this case, right? The diagram there. So this is a web server, and there's a database server, and then there's an FTP server. So all of them have some form of communication with each other. The attacker scans the network from the compromised server and finds other vulnerable systems. Realize that, oh, this is the guy I compromised. And from here, I ran a scan in the network. Now, remember that this guy is already compromised, so he doesn't even know he's running it as part. Whatever this guy has developed is sitting here as what part of the buildup of this particular service. And from that service, interaction is done on the network, and this guy find out that they are both compromised. Nmap is a tool that can do that, right? You can download Nmap. That's very easy to download. You run a scan, you target a particular IP address, run a scan, and see how it works. There are other tools. Metasploit is one, and it has the capabilities that is hidden in Metapreter. Metapreter is the interpreter of meta information as a tool that is actually installed, or it comes with Metasploit. You can scan for SMBs. SMBs are short message blocks, server message blocks, right? You can scan for SMB shares that you may, I think it's within Microsoft, I think. It actually is able to allow access to certain information, and there are certain privileges assigned to it. Things like execute, read, sometimes even to printers. Okay, so it's actually implemented usually in Microsoft environment. So the alternatively can instantiate an SMB share via Samba or similar mechanisms and copy files from a compromised system. So once files are copied, they are good, they are done. So you can, with SMB, you can move files from one system to the other. So it's like a directory that allows services or file exchange to occur in a in a defined environment. File sharing, you can do that. Sharing. Somebody asking a question. Yeah. Yeah, it is a very wicked vulnerability. That's why, and it works on the reason is because with SMB, right, you have things like you can go ahead and share files. You can actually even share printers. You can do authentication permission, right? And you can also allow, oh, my network is becoming unstable. Can also allow access across different operating systems, right? It's and it also depends on the version that you're running. But then is in itself, please note, SMB was not originally weak. It was not originally weak. I said this at the beginning so that we give credit to the people who developed these things at the time when it was done. The only challenge was perhaps they didn't sit down to understand the attacks against those the features or the structure of the particular stuff that they've developed. And so because that didn't happen, a lot of tools were used to take advantage of the existing nature that it has. Let's paint it this way. No, there are certain people who are nice. They are naturally nice. But life happens to them, then they become wicked, right? So in their own, you can look at them and say, this person is nice and he's a befu, he's a mumu. You take advantage of his niceness. But after he has suffered one or two, right? He will now change, and then you're wondering, but he was such a nice guy. She was so nice, but they faced one or two attacks. So typically at the point of creation of most of these applications or services, they are usually built for the best, or they're built as the best at the time. But then after a while, things evolve, and we notice that we can actually bypass, looking at their operational status, we can actually bypass or even take advantage of some of their behavior. And there, it's just like the communication between servers and client. It was great until DOS came up, taking advantage of saying, let's overwhelm this particular server with too many synchronization requests and so on. So yeah, it's a very powerful, it's a very, as you say, powerful vulnerability. I can't wonder how I want to explain them. But yeah, that's what it is. So you can use remote access protocol, including the following, to communicate with compromised system. These are things that you can use. Apple Remote Desktop for Apple. We can use VNC. VNC is virtual network computing, and then there's X server forwarding, right? Then there's Microsoft's remote desktop protocol. Remember that there's this um, tool that most people use to, at some point, it looks very intriguing. You're sitting down, you're not touching your system because you went ahead and installed the Microsoft Remote Desktop or activate that feature. Somebody can from somewhere dial into your system. You click allow, the person is moving mouse. And it's okay, no, let me walk it. We're checking your system. Let's check. Oh, yeah, this, then they could drop something for that. Please don't finish you, right? It's a feature that is embedded in Microsoft systems. But then it's a huge compromise. So the figure below shows an example of using Metasploit to create remote desktop, that's remote desktop protocol. It provides the option to create an account and configure it to be a member of the local administrators and remote desktop user group. Is available on port 3389. Now, remote desktop's main advantage over other tools like sys internals is that it gives you a full interactive graphical user interface of the remote compromised computer. Now, let's assume that you're not even compromised and I want to compromise you, right? You can install an application or maybe even it could be a particular application that your enterprise is using. And we have this contractual agreement between our organization and yours. And it allows for us to escalate certain services. So after using it to a certain level, you have some issues, you send them a mail. So, okay, oh yeah, do you please install this application and let me see what's happening. And you go ahead and interact with your device and all. It could compromise you from that point. From the remote connection, it is possible to steal data or collect screenshots, go ahead to disable security software, or even install softwares that are malicious. That's malware. So remote desktops are fully encrypted and monitoring systems cannot see what you are doing in the remote system. The main disadvantage of remote desktop is that a user working on a compromised system may be able to detect that you are logged on to the system. A common practice is to use remote desktop when no user are on the compromised system or when compromising a server. Many different legitimate. Okay, this was what you were saying. Oh, it makes sense now. It makes sense now. I don't know who was it JB? Somebody, no, it was FL Sound. But I had not mentioned Windows Management Instrumentation. Oh, okay, for exploitation. Maybe you read ahead. Oh, I see. So many different legitimate legitimate utilities such as PowerShell, Windows Management Instrumentation, and sys internals can be used for post-exploitation. Yeah, Mohammed. Oh, yeah, I get it now. I think I understand what you're saying now, but I didn't catch your question. So I got thrown off balance. And at that time, I was actually running a different trail of thought, So maybe you can pose the question again. Amoku Siam, so Amoku Lukam. Right? Okay, so similarly, you can use legitimate tools and installed application in Linux or Mac OS system to perform post-exploitation services. If a compromised system has Python installed, for example, you can use it for additional exploitation and exfiltration. Python is becoming is a tool that I would advise a lot of people to begin learning. You might not be guru at it, but understand their structuring and all of those. So when you see a .py shell or a .py script, you can interpret it by looking at it. Similarly, you can use the bash shell and tools like netcat for post-exploitation. Now, using legitimate tools to perform post-exploitation activity is often referred to as living off the land, and in some cases as fileless malware. The term fileless malware refers to the idea that there is no need to install any additional software or binaries to the compromised system. Examples of living off the land post-exploitation techniques include tasks that are carried out using the PowerShell, right? PowerSploit and Empire, Bloodhound, Windows Management Instrumentation for post-exploitation tasks. Now I get what you were asking. Makes sense now. Sys internals and PS exec, and Windows Remote Management for post-exploitation tasks. So you can use PowerShell to get directory listings. These are the command: get child item to list directories, copy items, right? Whether you copy, use CP or copy or CPI, move items around, select strings, get content, get location, get process, get service, and the rest of them. So this is the table that lists the useful commands that can be these useful commands in PowerShell for post-exploitation. Remember, post-exploitation is, like we said at the beginning, to ensure that you maintain, having exploited, you gain access and remain there. You can use all of these things to find out the directory of the path and remain there. So these are other legitimate commands using legitimate utilities. This is not importing outside tools. That's why it's called leaf of the land. The following PowerShell command can be used to avoid detection by security products and antivirus softwares. So you use that to invoke PowerShell tcp.psi. New object wetnet.web client. This command directly loads a PS1 file from the internet instead of downloading it and then executing it on the device. So what's a PS1 command? PS1 command is just a file for what's it called? Prompt string script, yeah, which usually is more popular within the Linux environment, but it allows is an executable file, is a Linux-based system file which defines the format of a prompt for executing the command. Remote management in Windows via PowerShell, often called PowerShell PS remoting, is a basic feature that a system administrator can use to access and manage systems remotely. An attacker could also take advantage of this feature to perform post-exploitation activities. So these are commands from the PowerSploit. So collection of PowerShell modules that can be used for post-exploitation and other assessment phases. So invoke, out encoded command. These are all commands. When you get to this recording, you can pause them and look at them. You can use that for U for user, H for host names, small letter H for host names, capital letter H for full host names. Usually the small letter H is for shortened host name, right? And so on and so forth. You can use @ for current time. S for shell name. You have double backslash for I think changing directory or so, if I remember very clearly. So these are some of the commands that are available that you can use. Just going through them. Once you get to the recording, you can pause them when you get there and deal with them. They are in your curriculum. Unfortunately, our time is up, and I apologize that we're going to have to stop here. I think we did some good amount of justice to this content. The rest of it is actually what you can go ahead and deal with. So Bloodhound is simply what's it called? Bloodhound is actually given to some kind of dog who's very good at investigating and picking out stuff. It identifies a lot of, so all you need to do is just get a WIMP and you can find it. This guy works somewhat the same way. Yeah. So it's for remote management. The advantage that you're asking, the advantage of Windows remote management. Yeah, it's just like your remote desktop protocol. So I can actually this compromised system might not be the one I'm seated on. So I can use that to access the device that's been compromised and not get exposed. I don't know if I answered your question. Is that Mohammed? Did I answer your question? Yeah, so largely it's just remote. And you can use that to access all the PowerShell command. Yeah, all the PowerShell command, not seated on the system, but remotely access it. Because, PowerShell is already not what should be available to any other person from the outside. You can do some form of, yeah, just automated works. And I think also it is allowed within the framework of your firewall. It's not flagged, and I don't know whether I'm talking right now. Yeah, your firewall actually allows that, right? I think built into it is also some form of encryption for it, right? Um, so data transmitted across, you know. So instead of the typical Windows desktop protocol, that's the remote desktop protocol, WinRM is preferable. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, FL Sound. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll have our class. We'll be dealing with Module 9. Thank you all so much for your time today. Please, the rest of what is left, attempt to please go through them. I know it might be very tough, but again, we are just guides as we move across this, right? So that's that. Thank you all very much. See you tomorrow, same time. Thank you. Thank you, Oladimeji. Thank you, Gwet. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Omoru. Thank you. So see you guys.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.